Yeah, so it was really like a two-part conversation. The first part was about like when you have a swap queue and you say you get like 10 swaps in the swap queue, we're looking to execute, some trades or whatever. Like how do you prioritize which goes first, which goes second, which goes fifth, which goes 10th, so forth and so on. And historically speaking, we've always designed this from the algo for this has always been the same since the very, very beginning. We've never actually changed it before. And what that was largest trades go first, smallest trades go last, right? So you're just organizing by that. And the reason why it was done that way was for a couple of reasons. One, we don't want validators to pick the order. Like we don't want validators to be able to say, okay, you're going to go first and you're going to second, because that just creates MEV opportunities, and we want to not do that if we can avoid it. So like that was one of the kind of key thoughts. But the other thing was just like we kind of just modeled it after like the way Bitcoin works, right? Like Bitcoin, you have a gas, or they call it transaction fee, and who goes first and who goes last is like who pays the highest amount in fees, right? Like if you want your Bitcoin transaction to go really quickly, you can pay a lot of money. And I've seen people pay like $700, for a transaction fee on Bitcoin, historically
We
speaking. Like,
we we had a member of our own community pay 800 grand transaction fee uh, a year or
wow.
two ago. Do you remember that?
I don't
I,
remember. I mean,
I won't
I
say
don't
him
remember that.
because I don't want to embarrass him, but the community rallied. It was some weird accident mistake, and the community rallied, found out which miner it went through. We got in touch with the miner or the mining pool, and they returned it. They gave it back to him.
Oh my God.
So nice. Sorry to
Thank
interrupt
God.
you.
Thank
Um,
God.
yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
like, no, no, it's fine. Like, so, yeah. So like you can opt to pay as much as you want, right? And the funny thing is that like, how you pay it is kind of a funny thing in Bitcoin world. Like it's kind of a, to me, I find it a little bit funny. It's like you're transferring like some amount of your Bitcoin like to someplace, and then you're returning some of it back to yourself. Like I get like a UTXO that's got like one Bitcoin. Half of it I'm sending it to like Patriot, and the other half I'm sending back myself. But I guess send myself a little bit less back, and that's basically what the fee is, right? Anyways, so we decided to model it after Bitcoin because Bitcoin's such a great protocol, well designed, protocol, and so we model it similar to that. That's what happened, right? Fast forward a few years, we introduced this new idea called streaming swaps, right? Because before that point, every swap happened in a single block, whatever the size of the trade is, the whole thing gets executed. And how much you pay in fees is relative to how large the trade is, right? But with streaming swaps, it's a little bit different because instead of looking at the size of the sub swap, we're looking at the size of the total swap, if that makes sense, right? And so there was some kind of complaints, if you want to call it that, around arbitrage bots making a very large trade, right? Like, I don't know how the size would be, but just one very large trade and getting the first sub swap or maybe the second sub swap to arbitrage a pool, and then the remainder of them would like fail on purpose. And so it's a way of kind of like hacking in a way to get ahead of somebody else. So if you have a very large amount of money, you could kind of like front run, so to speak, if you wanted to, using this kind of technique. So there was like a discussion and debate back and forth between changing it from the size of the swap, like the total swap size, to like the size of the individual sub swap. And so by changing it to the individual sub swap, it gives more kind of an ability for more people to participate in this kind of auctioning off process. Like the interesting part about it is that like the larger your trade, the more you pay in fees, the less you're going to get out on the other side. So like less profits you're going to take as an arbitrage bot in that scenario. So in order to beat somebody else, right, you have to pay more in fees to get ahead of them. And if they want to beat you, they got to pay more fees than you. And then you have this kind of natural capitalistic markets, like whoever is willing to take the least amount in fees basically wins the auction between these, 3 or 4 arb bots or whatever's happening in the system. So that's the first conversation. There was a back and forth for a while on that. I think the eventual consensus was that we're going to switch to looking at the sub swap size instead of the total swap size to determine who's first, who's second. And so that's going to be changed probably in 316, the next release, which is coming out, I think, in like 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, something like this. That's the first part. The second part that we kind of discussed about was should limit swaps and market swaps be treated differently in the sorting system, right? Should they be intertwined? If you guys remember, I kind of use this weird hand gesture
The wife
last
pleaser.
time. The wife teaser hand gesture from last week, right? Are they intertwined like this, or are they like first is this and then is that? And so the reason why I argued for first limit swaps and then market orders was because I wanted ARBs to use limit swaps to execute on trades, right? Because if an ARB was using limit swaps, they'd be much more useful in the context of rapid swaps when we enable rapid swaps in the near future, right? So that was my way of kind of like ensuring that all ARBs would use limit swaps to create the kind of order books and build up those kind of liquidity walls around the price, so that a streaming swap in a rapid swap scenario could be executed in a single block. So we had a conversation. We went back and forth. Me and Deval or I don't know exactly how to pronounce his Discord name, but and then Sick Time also kind of came into the conversation as well, which is great. We had a kind of conversation about it. We went back and forth, and then the synopsis was that I was going to go back and take a second look at some things and kind of reevaluate some sandwich possibilities and this kind of stuff. The sandwich possibilities, I don't think is that serious. Like, it's technically on paper, it is feasible, but it's so the market has to be like a certain kind of way, and it's not very easy to execute, in my opinion. But even beside that, for a moment, what I ended up doing was I took a second look at the implementation of rapid swaps, and I found another way of actually solving the problem so that everybody gets what they want, right? And so what it is refactoring a little bit or making a small change to the logic of how rapid swaps works, so that it's much safer to execute even before you have the liquidity in those like liquidity walls to execute the trades, right? So the fear that I had, that I've always had about rapid swaps, why I have not flipped it on before this moment, was that if you're in a situation where somebody puts up a streaming swap and say there's 10 sub swaps within this streaming swap thing, and this is the only trade on the network, there's no other liquidity, there's no other trades, it's just one thing, then hypothetically in a rapid swap scenario, all 10 trades would be executed in the same block, which means that each sub trade within it would never get a counterbalance, an arb pushing in the opposite direction to correct the pool price between each trade that you have. And so then you become like, you're just pushing the price down and down and down and down 10 times, each time getting less and less output, less and less tokens on the other side, which probably mathematically is not too dissimilar from just like doing one large trade versus 10 small trades, right? It's probably pretty close to each other. So I was afraid of that. Like, I didn't want to break streaming swaps so that you don't get that great execution with a streaming swap. So I wanted to build the walls of liquidity around the protocol so that there would be a good amount of liquidity there to support the streaming swaps when rapid swaps starts trading. So instead, I went back and I kind of found another way of thinking about rapid swaps to make it safer, so that in a sense that if that is a situation and you are the only swap and there's 10 swaps, it won't execute all 10 trades in one block. It'll do one trade per block, or maybe even two if you're at most, right? And so that improves it so that like when there isn't liquidity there, it just breaks from being an escalator into being like a staircase, right? And that makes sense. Like, streaming swaps just go back to being what they've always been and what they are in this current moment, and then rapid swaps just isn't available in this particular moment because there's no counterbalance or counter liquidity, or arbs aren't arbing, and therefore it just goes back to the regular old system, which we have right now, which is just fine, right? So with this code change, assuming it gets merged, which I hope it gets merged probably tomorrow or maybe Monday, it goes in 316. I think it'll be probably safe that we can actually flip rapid swaps on in 316, which would be great. And then once we do that, rapid swaps will kind of sort of disable itself sort of a little, based upon if arbs are showing up to do the arb work or not. And so my hope is that, and this is what Sick Time was kind of advocating for, was that like if we build it, they will come kind of mentality. If it's old Field of Dreams reference, if you're not as old as me in the crowd. But the idea is hopefully we just would build it, we'll launch it, and then arbs will just show up and then provide the liquidity, and then rapid swaps will just start kind of happening naturally in the protocol.